What happens when two Hollywood legends clash so intensely on live television that the host has to literally stop the show? Today, we're diving into the explosive confrontation between Whoopi Goldberg and Morgan Freeman that left audiences speechless and producers scrambling. This wasn't your typical celebrity disagreement. This was a full-blown verbal battle that exposed deep-seated tensions in Hollywood. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe how this unfolds. The morning started like any other at the View Studios. Whoopi Goldberg sat in her familiar spot at the moderator's desk, coffee steaming beside her notes as the production crew made final adjustments. Morgan Freeman was scheduled as the guest for their Hot Topics segment, promoting his latest documentary about social justice in America. What seemed like a perfect match on paper was about to become television gold for all the wrong reasons. "We're back in 30 seconds, called out the floor manager as Whoopi shuffled through her index cards. She had prepared what she thought would be a straightforward interview about Freeman's new project, but something in his demeanor during the commercial break had caught her attention. He seemed unusually tense, his jaw set in a way she hadn't seen before. The red light flickered on and Whoopi's professional smile emerged. "Welcome back to The View. I'm here with the legendary Morgan Freeman, whose new documentary, Voices Unheard, examines social justice movements across America. Morgan, thank you for being here." Freeman nodded slightly, his piercing eyes fixed on Whoopi with an intensity that made her shift in her seat. "Thank you for having me, Whoopi. Though I have to say, I'm curious about your perspective on some of the topics we'll be discussing today." There was something in his tone that immediately put Whoopi on edge. After decades in entertainment, she had developed a sixth sense for when conversations were about to take an unexpected turn. "Well, that's what we're here for, meaningful dialogue. Tell us about the documentary and what inspired you to tackle this subject." Freeman leaned forward, his famous voice carrying a weight that seemed to fill the entire studio. "Before we talk about the documentary, I think we need to address something more pressing. The way certain voices in media have been shaping narratives without truly understanding the communities they claim to represent." Whoopi's eyebrows raised slightly. This wasn't the direction she had expected the interview to go, but she was nothing if not adaptable. "That's an interesting point, Morgan. Are you referring to specific instances or speaking more generally about media representation?" "I'm talking about people who use their platforms to speak for communities they've never truly been part of," Freeman replied, his gaze never wavering from Whoopi's face. "People who assume that celebrity status gives them the authority to be spokespeople for causes they understand only from the outside." The studio fell silent except for the hum of the cameras. Whoopi felt her professional composure being tested as she realized this might be heading toward personal territory. "I think most people in media try to use their platforms responsibly, Morgan. We all have a duty to amplify important voices and stories." Freeman's laugh was dry, almost bitter. "Amplify voices, yes. But there's a difference between amplification and appropriation. Wouldn't you agree? There's a difference between supporting a cause and becoming the face of it when you haven't lived the experience." Whoopi's fingers tightened around her coffee mug. She could feel the energy in the room shifting, and she knew her co-hosts were watching this exchange with growing concern. "I'm not sure I follow your implication, Morgan. Could you be more specific about what you're trying to say?" "I'm saying that some people in this industry have built careers on speaking about struggles they've observed but never endured," Freeman continued, his voice growing more pointed. "They've taken platforms meant for authentic voices and turned them into personal soapboxes." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Whoopi felt her professional mask beginning to slip as she recognized the personal nature of his comments. "Morgan, if you have something specific you want to discuss with me, I think it would be more productive to address it directly rather than speaking in generalities." Freeman smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Very well, let's be direct. Your commentary on issues affecting the African American community, particularly your recent statements about generational trauma and systemic oppression. You speak with such authority about experiences that, frankly, your privileged position in Hollywood has shielded you from for decades." Whoopi's eyes flashed with anger, but she maintained her composure. "Privileged position? Morgan, I think you're forgetting where I came from. I didn't start out in Hollywood mansions. I know exactly what struggle looks like." "Do you?" Freeman challenged. "Because from where I sit, you've been insulated from the real world for so long that your perspective has become distorted. You talk about systemic oppression while sitting in a penthouse, speaking for people whose daily reality you haven't shared in 30 years. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Whoopi felt her carefully maintained professional demeanor cracking. "That's incredibly presumptuous of you, Morgan. You don't know anything about my personal experiences or my connection to these issues. I know that you've become comfortable speaking for communities you no longer belong to." Freeman shot back. "I know that your voice has become so amplified that it drowns out the people who are actually living these struggles every day." Whoopi's voice rose slightly, her famous temper beginning to show. "So because I've been successful, I'm no longer allowed to speak about issues that affect my community? Success invalidates my experiences and my right to advocacy?" "Success doesn't invalidate your experiences," Freeman replied, his tone becoming more aggressive. "But it does change your perspective, whether you want to admit it or not. And when you refuse to acknowledge that change, when you continue to speak as if you're still living those struggles, you're doing a disservice to the people who actually are." The studio was now completely silent, with even the camera operators seeming to hold their breath. Whoopi felt a surge of indignation that threatened to overwhelm her professional training. "I cannot believe you're sitting here questioning my authenticity and my right to speak about my own community. This is incredibly inappropriate, Morgan." Freeman leaned back in his chair, his expression unmoved by her obvious anger. "What's inappropriate is using your platform to perpetuate narratives that serve your image more than they serve the people you claim to represent. What's inappropriate is speaking with authority about realities you've been removed from for decades." Whoopi's hands were visibly shaking now, her composure finally beginning to crack under the sustained assault. "You have absolutely no right to determine my connection to my community or the validity of my voice. No right whatsoever, don't I?" Freeman's voice cut through her protest like a blade. "Because last I checked, questioning the authenticity of public voices is exactly what journalism is supposed to do. Or have you forgotten that your role here is supposed to be more than just celebrity commentary?" Whoopi's face flushed with anger, her professional mask now completely abandoned. "How dare you come on my show and lecture me about journalism? How dare you sit there and act like you have some moral authority over me?" "Your show?" Freeman repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Interesting choice of words. I thought this was supposed to be a platform for diverse voices, not Whoopi Goldberg's personal echo chamber." The other co-hosts exchanged worried glances, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Joy Behar shifted uncomfortably in her seat while Sunny Hostin looked between the two combatants with growing alarm. But Whoopi was beyond caring about the opinions of her colleagues at this point. "You know what, Morgan? I think this interview is over," Whoopi declared, starting to remove her earpiece. "I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly came here with an agenda." "There it is," Freeman said, his voice filled with satisfaction. "The moment when the facade drops and we see the real response to being challenged. Run away, shut down the conversation, silence the voice that dares to question you." Whoopi froze, her hand halfway to her earpiece. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Freeman continued, pressing his advantage. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone challenges your narrative, your authority, your comfortable position as the voice of the community, you shut down. You silence them. Just like you've been silencing authentic voices for years." Whoopi's eyes blazed with fury. "I have never silenced anyone. I have spent my entire career lifting up voices, creating opportunities, fighting for representation." "Fighting for representation or fighting for your version of representation?" Freeman shot back. "Because there's a difference between creating space for authentic voices and creating space for voices that agree with your particular brand of activism." "My brand of activism?" Whoopi's voice was now noticeably louder, her famous temper on full display. "What exactly is wrong with my activism, Morgan? What exactly have I done that's so terrible in your eyes?" Freeman leaned forward again, his presence somehow filling even more of the space between them. "You've created a cult of personality around your opinions. You've made yourself the final word on issues that deserve broader, more nuanced discussion. You've turned complex social problems into Whoopi Goldberg talking points. That is absolutely ridiculous." Whoopi snapped, her voice echoing through the studio. "I have never claimed to be the final word on anything. I share my opinions, my perspectives, just like everyone else on this show." "Do you?" Freeman challenged. "Because from what I've observed, your opinions tend to become the show's opinions. Your perspective tends to dominate the conversation. When was the last time one of your co-hosts fundamentally disagreed with you on a major issue?" Whoopi glanced quickly at her co-hosts, who were now looking distinctly uncomfortable. They disagree with me all the time. We have debates, discussions, different viewpoints." Freeman's smile was knowing, almost predatory. Disagreements about tactics? Maybe. Disagreements about details? But fundamental challenges to your worldview? Fundamental questions about your authority to speak on certain issues? I don't think so. "You don't know what you're talking about," Whoopi said, but there was less conviction in her voice now. "You don't watch this show. You don't know our dynamics." "I don't need to watch every episode to see the pattern," Freeman replied. "I can see it right now in this moment. You're more concerned with defending your position than with examining whether my criticisms might have merit." Whoopi's hands clenched into fists on the table. "Your criticisms don't have merit because they're based on assumptions and generalizations rather than facts." "Are they?" Freeman asked. "Then let's talk facts. When was the last time you lived in a working-class neighborhood? When was the last time you had to worry about making rent? When was the last time you experienced the daily reality of the people you claim to represent?" "I don't have to prove my credentials to you," Whoopi shot back, her voice shaking with rage. "I don't have to justify my background or my experiences to anyone, least of all to you." Freeman nodded slowly. "And there's the problem. You don't think you need to examine your own position, your own privilege, your own distance from the struggles you speak about so confidently. You think your past experiences give you permanent authority to speak for people whose present reality you no longer share." "My past experiences are part of who I am," Whoopi declared. "They don't disappear because I've been successful. They don't become invalid because my circumstances have changed." "No, they don't become invalid," Freeman agreed. "But they do become outdated. They do become less relevant to current struggles. And when you refuse to acknowledge that evolution, when you refuse to step back and let current voices take the lead, you become part of the problem you claim to be fighting." Whoopi stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. "I cannot believe the audacity. I cannot believe you came on this show to attack me personally under the guise of some intellectual discussion about representation." Freeman remained seated, calm in the face of her obvious agitation. "I came here to promote a documentary about authentic voices in social justice movements. The fact that this conversation has become personal says more about you than it does about me." "Don't you dare try to turn this around," Whoopi said, pointing an accusatory finger at him. "You came here with a script, with talking points designed to provoke exactly this reaction." "Did I?" Freeman asked. "Or did I simply ask questions that you're not comfortable answering? Questions about accountability? About self-reflection? About the responsibility that comes with the platform you've built?" Whoopi was breathing heavily now, her anger so palpable that the camera operators were zooming in to capture every nuance of her expression. "You know what your problem is, Morgan? You think that because you've made some documentaries and won some awards, you're somehow more authentic than the rest of us. You think you're the keeper of some kind of moral purity." Freeman's expression darkened for the first time during the exchange. "My problem? My problem is watching people like you use important social issues as career opportunities, while the people who are actually living those struggles get pushed further into the background." "Career opportunities?" Whoopi's voice cracked with indignation. "You think I've built my career on exploitation? You think everything I've done has been about personal gain? I think you've lost sight of the difference between advocacy and self-promotion," Freeman replied coldly. "I think you've become so accustomed to being the center of attention that you can't conceive of stepping aside for more relevant voices." The studio fell into a tense silence as Whoopi stared at him, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. The producers in the control room were frantically discussing whether to cut to commercial, but the compelling nature of the confrontation kept them rolling. Finally, Whoopi broke the silence, her voice low and dangerous. "You want to talk about stepping aside? You want to talk about making room for other voices? Then maybe you should take your own advice and stop using your platform to tear down other people who are actually trying to make a difference." Freeman's eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. "The difference between us, Whoopi, is that I'm not afraid to examine my own motivations. I'm not afraid to question whether my voice is the one that should be heard on every issue." "And I am?" Whoopi's voice rose again, her control slipping further. "You think I don't question myself? You think I don't wrestle with these issues?" "I think you wrestle with criticism," Freeman replied. "I think you wrestle with challenges to your authority. But genuine self-reflection? Genuine examination of whether your voice might sometimes do more harm than good? I don't see evidence of that." Whoopi's face contorted with rage. "You don't see evidence because you don't want to see it. You came here determined to paint me as some kind of fraudulent activist, and nothing I say is going to change your mind. Try me, Freeman said simply. Give me one example of when you've stepped back from an issue because you recognized that your voice wasn't the most important one to be heard. The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Whoopi opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again, her mind racing for an example that would satisfy his impossible standard. I thought so, Freeman said when the silence stretched too long. You can't think of one because it's never occurred to you that your voice might not be the most important one in the room. That's not fair, Whoopi protested, but her voice lacked conviction. That's an impossible standard. You're asking me to prove a negative. I'm asking you to show humility, Freeman corrected. I'm asking you to demonstrate that you understand the difference between having a platform and deserving one. Those words hit like a physical blow. Whoopi staggered slightly, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to catalog. Anger, hurt, confusion, and something that might have been recognition all flickered across her features. How dare you question whether I deserve my platform, she whispered, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. How dare you suggest that everything I've built, everything I've worked for, everything I've accomplished is somehow illegitimate? Freeman's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. I'm not questioning your accomplishments, Whoopi. I'm questioning whether those accomplishments give you the right to speak for people whose struggles you no longer share. Those struggles will always be part of me, Whoopi said, tears now visible in her eyes. You can't take that away from me. You can't erase where I came from or what I've been through. No one's trying to erase your history, Freeman replied. But history is just that, history. It's not a license to speak for people's present reality. Whoopi wiped her eyes angrily, smearing her makeup. So what are you saying? That I should just shut up? That I should stop advocating for issues I care about because I've been successful? I'm saying you should listen more than you speak, Freeman said. I'm saying you should amplify current voices instead of competing with them. I'm saying you should recognize that your perspective, valuable as it may be, is no longer the most relevant one. The words seemed to drain all the fight out of Whoopi. She stood there for a moment, swaying slightly, looking older and more fragile than anyone had ever seen her on television. You know what? She said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't do this anymore. I can't sit here and be attacked like this on my own show. She turned to face the cameras directly, her tear-streaked face filling the frame. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, but we need to stop the show. This has gone too far. Freeman leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Running away again, Whoopi? Silencing the conversation when it becomes uncomfortable? Whoopi spun back to face him, her composure completely shattered. I'm not running away from anything. I'm protecting this show and our audience from your deliberate attempt to humiliate me on live television. The truth isn't humiliation, Freeman said calmly. The truth is just uncomfortable. Your version of the truth, Whoopi shot back. Your biased, predetermined version of who I am and what I represent. Freeman stood up slowly, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the desk. My version is based on observation, on patterns of behavior, on the gap between your words and your actions. What's yours based on? Whoopi's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. The weight of his question, combined with the intensity of the entire confrontation, seemed to crush her ability to respond. This is exactly what I mean, Freeman continued, his voice gentler now but no less pointed. When challenged to examine yourself, to really look at your own motivations and methods, you shut down. You retreat into anger and victimhood instead of engaging with the criticism. I'm not a victim, Whoopi managed to say, but her voice was so weak it barely carried across the studio. No, you're not, Freeman agreed. You're a powerful media figure with enormous influence, which is exactly why these questions matter, which is exactly why you should be able to answer them. Whoopi looked around the studio desperately, taking in the shocked faces of her co-hosts, the frozen camera operators, the producers visible through the control room windows. Everyone was watching her, waiting to see what she would do next. Cut to commercial, she said suddenly, her voice finding strength again. Cut to commercial right now. Whoopi, Joy Behar said tentatively. Maybe we should just… Now, Whoopi repeated, louder this time. I said cut to commercial now. Freeman watched this exchange with the same calm intensity he'd maintained throughout the confrontation. Even now, you're trying to control the narrative. Even now, you're trying to silence the uncomfortable conversation. Whoopi turned to him one final time, her eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and rage. "You came here to destroy me, Morgan. You came here with a plan to tear me down in front of my audience, and you've succeeded. I hope you're proud of yourself." Freeman's expression remained unchanged. "I came here to have a conversation about authenticity and accountability. The fact that you experienced it as destruction says everything about your relationship with criticism." "Get out," Whoopi whispered, her voice breaking. "Just get out of my studio." Freeman nodded slowly, gathering his composure as he prepared to leave. "This is exactly the conversation we should be having in Hollywood, Whoopi. The fact that you can't handle it proves how necessary it is." He stood and walked toward the exit, leaving Whoopi standing alone at the desk, tears streaming down her face as the cameras continued to roll. The studio remained in stunned silence, the weight of what had just transpired settling over everyone like a heavy blanket. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Does Morgan Freeman have a point about media authenticity, or did he go too far in his criticism of Whoopi? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes Hollywood drama that you won't see anywhere else.